I remember waking to a terrible crying from my mother, or was the crying only part of my dreams? Someone was shaking my shoulder, telling me to get up quickly and run, run. My tortured mind could not absorb the one word run. Still enmeshed in a violent dreaming was my mind. Mehmed whimpered like a little animal, and I caught his hand as he ran blindly past me, swinging myself from the bed, bemused, bewildered, wondering if this horror was still part of a nightmare. My mother was screaming, no control left in her voice. But what was it? She said, I shall never know. Only guess it, perhaps. And the unendurable nightmare persisted. In the dark doorway, clouds of thick, acrid, eye-watering vapour caused me to choke, but my mother, with Moazes wailing in her arms, inexorably pushed Mehmed and me on before her, down the dark stairs with the hot, thick vapour burning on our throats. Blindly we stumbled, terror-stricken and half-stupid with sleep. A great dark red lick of flame belched upwards to meet us. No, no, screamed Mehmed, hesitating and dragging on my hand to impede progress. Fire, I shouted, suddenly wide awake and comprehending, but my mother pushed me on and I dragged Mehmed after me, his feet slithering reluctantly on the stairs. Run, commanded my mother in an awful voice, a voice to freeze the blood and the marrow, and she forcibly impelled me onward with such force that Mehmed fell on one knee, letting go of my hand. She swooped down on him, frantically tearing him by the shoulder, shouted to me to hold her skirts, and ran like the wind down the narrow pathway through the flames. For a moment that seemed an eternity. She wrenched at the overheated front door, swinging it open for us to fall into the daylight of the street. Oh, to remember that night when the enemy spies set fire to the wooden houses of Istanbul, when they burnt like matchwood under a summer sky. The street was daylight, for all the houses on both sides were lurid blazing mass. The garden door, my mother was saying piously. We had not been able to get to the garden door. The flames in our house had been worse at the back. Did we stand foolishly in the flaming street for one petrified moment? Who knows? Memory has shut down on that, for I can only coherently remember running along the street, clutching my mother tightly, while she sought a way to turn off to reach the waste field that lay at the back of our house, at the bottom of the garden. The street was full of humanity gone momentarily mad. Maidservants, old men in their nightshirts, screaming petrified children, and tumbling down on us great fiery rafters from the derelict, deserted houses. One fell on my mother's pat. I heard her give a sort of gasp of horror, moaning, inhuman gasp. Pitter, patter, pitter went our bare running feet on the hard cobblestones, and our breath emerged harshly from our chests, and all the time the fires cracked merrily. Down a dark street this time, with no falling rafters to block our path, frantic men and women at their doors, wondering if the fires would spread to threaten them too. God save us, what a terrible night, said their grotesque faces, but we panted to reach the open fields. Waste ground at last, soft grass under our bleeding feet, and mass hysteria to greet us under the fig trees. Mehmed and I fell on the ground, sore and bleeding, our hearts thumping to bursting point, our tin nightshirts bound with perspiration to our shivering bodies. My mother laid Morazes across my lap and leaned against a stunted little tree in the posture undeniably touching and desolate. My money, she said over and over again, and all my jewellery. And suddenly, like a mad thing, and indeed I believe the dark, feathery wing of madness touched her brow eternally that night. She darted away from us on her weary, bleeding feet. Anne, Anne, mother, mother, I shouted in a fresh paroxysm of terror. Don't leave us, oh don't leave us. Then I started to cry in a weak sort of way, for I had no energy left to put into crying. But my mother ran unheeding of my crying voice, stumbling a little, falling over, picking herself up to forge ahead. Moazes lay on my knee, wrapped in a lacy woolen shawl, and I bent over her, wearily trying to hush her whimpering. Mehmed plucked at my sleeve, wanting sympathy too, and I put an arm about him and drew him against my shoulder. We watched the fires and our own house burning with the rest, and our brains were numb, no longer functioning properly. Even fear and tiredness had dropped away to leave us mercifully empty. All about us, children were crying and women were wailing, but these were only external things having no power over us. Even the knowledge that my mother had gone back to the burning house could arouse no emotion, revive no terror. We just sat there, Mehmet and I, and the fig tree stretched above us, and now and again Moazes softly whimpered. Before us lay our garden, and farther back was our home that had been our comfort and our childish security. The district Tulumba had arrived, and were trying to find water, and their frantic shouts echoed to us across the gardens. We could see them running from place to place, trying in vain to stem the fires. They had only one pump, but at least 10 houses were burning, and on the other side of the street, which we could not see from here, as many more burned. So they ran and they shouted, throwing ineffectual buckets of water. The fires roared triumphantly. I was watching for my mother to come back, but there was no sign of her for a long, long time. Then I saw her running to us down the garden path, for it was as light as day, and I plainly saw her night-dressed figure and the thin, white, delicate feet running. She came to us and flung herself down, utterly exhausted, as her hair hung wildly about her face, and in mournful eyes was a glare, a brilliance, which knew nothing of sanity. She looked towards her house, and I looked too, for the last bit of the roof came down into the greedy inferno that waited for it. Our house, like all the others, had blazed up like matchwood, like a piece of paper, and now only its ghostly shell remained to remind us that once we had been happy there.